Hey everybody, welcome to the Ham Radio Crash Course. I am Josh, amateur radio, call sign KI6NAZ. Today we are going to be looking at the Yaesu FTdx-10, the brand new hybrid SDR that was just released by Yaesu. And we're going to cover what I like about it, some of the cool features that I found, and kind of who I think it's for, because it fits in kind of an interesting niche within the Yaesu product line. Okay, I hope you stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get started. Just want to give a big thank you to Ham Radio Outlet for letting me borrow this loaner version of the FTdx10. Go check them out if you're interested in the radio. Now, right off the top, this is a hybrid SDR, and I will endeavor to explain what that means at a high level. It is an HF-only radio plus 6 meters, so you get 160 meters through 6 meters. It fits in a spot right between the FTdx-101 and the FT991 that Yaesu still produces. It's about $1,700 with taxes, probably a little bit more in the United States. And it feels like, so I'll just give you my high-level thoughts on it right up front. It feels like it's closer to the MP101 than it is closer to the 991, if that makes sense. And that's not saying anything bad about either radio. It's a lot of fun. It has a lot of interesting features that I think people will get enjoyment out of, and it can be operated in a couple of different ways with the on-screen controls and the copious amounts of dials and buttons for a radio that is considered an SDR. Okay, let's talk about SDRs a second. I know this is an FTdx10 video, but I think a distinction needs to be made on what a direct conversion SDR is versus a hybrid SDR. So, ideal, if you were to Wikipedia this, and this is a term that gets thrown around, and there are interchangeable terms, software-defined radio, software radio, that kind of stuff. An ideal SDR is generally considered one where an antenna is connected to a analog to digital converter, and then that data, that digital information, is pushed into some kind of processing body. A computer running some kind of SDR software, a Raspberry Pi running GNU Linux or something like that, or in the case of radios like these, other radios that are SDRs, some kind of FPGA, and that stands for Field Programmable Gate Assembly. So, what Yaesu's done here, and this is, call it the little brother to the FTdx-101. They added discrete RF components in between the antenna and that analog to digital conversion that happens before it gets to the internal FPGA. FPGA, the brains of the radio, the guts that's doing the processing for a lot of the stuff you're seeing. Changing bands, different modes, how some of the filtering works, filter widths, all that stuff is getting handled by the FPGA. In front of that digital conversion on the analog side, that's where you have your attenuator, your preamp, and your roofing filter in some order. I'll post the block diagram somewhere on this video, and I'll be annotating it as we go along. So having the discrete components in front of that digital conversion is neither good nor bad. It adds some benefit, but there's also potentially some disadvantage in that there can be discrete component loss. So adding components in the chain before getting it into the FPGA can introduce their own certain amount of dB loss. It's called an insertion loss. At that point, that then the data gets into the FPGA, you might be working with less information than when it had came in right off the antenna. There are schools of thought, again, going to the ideal, and I didn't come up with that term. The ideal SDR process is to feed that directly into the converter and then let the computer do the heavy lifting on all of it. Noise, all the dirty bits, everything that comes through that path, that RF path, just get it into the processing brain of the radio. An example of this would be if you are using a digital mode like FT8. What do we always say? We try to remove as many restrictors to the output audio or signal that goes into your computer. The reason for that is programs like FT8, modes like FT8, go deep down into the noise to pull out those signals. Well, if you've lost some of that or you've degraded some of that in the RF chain of your radio by either having filtering on or adjusting bandwidths to the point that you're, cutting stuff off or squishing it, you want to prevent that. Even so far as on some radios, you turn the AGC off, the automatic gain control, so you can just push all that information directly to the computer. A lot of people believe that's the preferred way to go with SDRs. Now, I will throw another, wrench into this. Consider, though, that the FTdx-10, the big brother to the 10, is the #1 receiver on Sherwood reporting, and Sherwood does a fantastic job of testing HF radios and displaying them on a 1 to N type of table, and he breaks down all the different measurements he does, and the FT101 is at the top. FT101DX, FTdx-10 is at the top. Now this RF chain, and again, I don't work for Yaesu. I'm not affiliated with Yaesu at all. This radio, I'm not convinced, has the same discrete RF components on the front end of that SDR to RF chain or RF to SDR chain than does the FTdx-10. Again, block diagrams here. You can see that there is different components on the FT101 than it is on the FTdx-10. Could they be the same actual part number, same actual product? Sure. Don't know. But I will leave you with this before we dive into my favorite features on the radio. There is a lot of discussion online, and I'm sure everything that I said, there will be some people that find issue with it. If you do, post in the comments below. I'm not going to go into a lot of details on all of this. I'm just going to give you the real high pass on it. There is kind of a jury out kind of situation with a lot of this stuff, discussing whether direct conversion or hybrid SDR is the way to go, not the way to go. Is there a preferred way to do things? Undoubtedly, there's probably a preferred way to do it, but at the same time, where we are at the technology space, we don't really lose anything by having some of those components on the front end pre-conversion. I'm sure there's people that will disagree with me. Regardless, there are still good showings in this hybrid space, this being one of them, and obviously the FTdx-101 considering its ranking on Sherwood. So, keep that in mind. Second or third caveat, all the radios that are coming out these days are fantastic. So with all this little, techie nerd stuff that I just gave you, consider that really what your decision is going to come down to is, do you like the interface of this radio? Do you like how it sounds? Do you like the tactile feel of the controls? At the end of the day, how you like a hand mic, the VFO knob, the controls on the touchscreen, even down to the font that they use for the numbers on the digital display, is likely going to be more important than the minutia of processing difference or performance on a single price range line of radios. There will be outstanding features that some have that some don't, sure, that give it the nod at a certain point in time. But generally, for RF performance, a lot of the radios that are coming out are fantastic. So keep that in mind. All right, so a lot of times I do a deep dive and I go through kind of all the radio's parts and stuff like that. Not necessarily what we're going to do today. And the reason for that is there is a lot here. There is a lot here, though, that you would expect on an HF radio. So this isn't going to be an intro to HF radio and then here's all the other good stuff. I'm going to focus on the stuff that I found when using this radio and making contacts that I was like, okay, yeah, these are pretty cool features. These are nice ways of going around it. You'll find, I'm guessing, as you watch this, that a lot of my points that I'm going to hit are going to be user control, user experience, and subtle things that will adjust performance, but, it's going to be user-focused in how I approach this, because at the end of the day, that's the thing you have to live with. So let's get this over on the workbench and have some fun. Kilo India 6 November Alpha Zulu.
Wow, you are weak. KI6NAZ, we got you into 6. Josh, are you busy or can you stay around?
I can stay around a minute. I'm on talking to you on the Yaesu FTdx-10, so I'm only at 100 watts output right now.
Okay, I'll let you go first. Josh, give some comments and whatever other junk you want to see.
QSL Connor, thanks for running the net. We'll be doing the live stream tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Walking around the front of the radio here, just right off the top, you have a VFO control and an outer bezel. This outer bezel will quickly move you across the band, but it's controllable with multiple different options. You can do a ton of different stuff if you have this CS control selector on. like change your waterfall level, for instance. All of these things are quite interesting. You can set them as you go. There are 4 outer dials. All of them are crown and center. The function is a push button, which brings up the main menu, and it is a multi-select dial that once you click it, you select what you want to change, like color, for instance, and you can adjust through the color palette as you like. I actually really like this white color. This looks cool to me. I don't know why. It looks very sci-fi, alien movie type thing, something you'd see on the Nostromo. I love this look. This looks cool. For anybody that doesn't like the 3D waterfall, and I've seen a lot of people mention that, check this out. Dial this back a little bit, so you just get a little bit of activity there, a little bit more. Now watch the signals pop up. It's like a sonar run, like a fish finder, or like, you know, that's the alien right there. That's the face hugger right there. That's where they're at. I think that's cool. I think it's really cool, particularly if you dial it in appropriately like it is here. At least that's how I like to do it. You have a ton of buttons. Now, I could go through all these. This video would be way too long if I did that. I will go through the ones that I find the most effective, most useful right out of the box, and some that are a bit tricky and fun to play with. But please explore this manual. This manual does a good job of covering the many controls that are on the radio. The only downside of this is a very good index, covers everything that the radio does. But I am a glossary guy. I go to the back of the manuals and I look for whatever it is I'm trying to do. I'm looking for keywords. I was looking for 0 beat. I have to know that that is 0 beat. Zin. Zin is 0 beat in Yaesu language. So I had to just correct myself, and I figured it out after I read for a little bit. But I was up and running really quickly after just reading this for really only the controls that were new to me. Everything else worked just fine. It kind of tells you exactly what they do, band, mode, AGC. You get it, the filtering, all this stuff kind of makes sense. It's only when you get to stuff like CS and again Zin and some of this other stuff where you need to look at the manual. But doesn't that look cool? I think it does. So I made some QSOs today using the stock mic, and I got really good reports on the audio quality. I was told I sounded great. The mic is pretty straightforward, frequency up and down, PTT, mute button, momentary mute. Works pretty good. There are also programmable buttons, but these have lock control. This is for the memory switch, so if you have memory channels selected, you click this to get into them. This turns on your preamp, turns it off. Okay, you have a host of I/O in the back of this. I'm actually pretty impressed by the number of options you have. One antenna port though, but keep in mind you have the ability to run an external display. You can run a keyboard and mouse. You can run a computer control or computer connection for CAT and audio through one cable. External speaker, your linear amp control. Still don't know what REM is. What is REM? Let's look it up. Of course! It's the proprietary remote that Yaesu sells. REM is for remote. Makes sense. I thought it was for REM Lazar, but you know. And then rounding out the left-hand side, you have a RIDI controller for if you want to connect a TNC. You have your tuner and an ACC jack if you want to connect another device through ACC. Each side has 2 screw mounts, so if you want to rack mount this, you can. And the bottom has a kickstand. Also, I will remind people that this VFO is friction controlled, and here is the friction control for it right there to slow down the spin of the VFO. One of the comments from the live stream was the question of what is the draw on receive? So you're looking at about 1.94 amps, call it 2 amps on draw, and that is which is with the screen turned on, just normal receiving. So, about what you'd expect for a base station. Let's take a little closer look at the FTdx here, particularly the screen. Obviously, if you set this up, reset right out of the box, you're going to see this 3D waterfall. Some people like it, some people don't. I happen to like it. I'm going to show you my little trick here to get it set up like this. It's not much of a trick, but if you want to turn it off, just click the 3D SS, and that'll bring up a traditional waterfall. And if you want to expand that further, hit the expand button, and that'll give you more of the spectrum display. But I generally like to leave these 4 buttons at top. These are the analog RF portions of the chain before it goes into the SDR. These are the controls you have. You have an attenuator, you have a preamp, and then the AGC and the filter. Keep in mind that you can switch anytime going back and forth from the 3D waterfall to the regular Spectrum display. I will note, though, and you're going to be going into this function button a lot. Let me show you really quickly kind of what it looks like in its stock config and how I change it. The level is going to be your default setting here, and that's the level reading for the waterfall display. So let's click that to accept it, meaning that's the control that's selected on the function button. Now, when you get this out of the box, this level is going to be +5. So it's going to look like this. And if you're like me in a city area where you've got noise and then you also have signals, you can't make heads or tails of this, right? It just becomes too busy. So what you got to do is you got to dial back that function way down. This isn't attenuation or RF gain that you're changing. This is the display output on the screen here. And what you're looking for is it's like a lawn with little shoots of grass sticking up. So you just kind of adjust it until you get what you want to see. Hit function, change the color to something green if you want a better effect that looks like a lawn. And so you get the idea that I'm talking about. That is a lot more usable. You see you have a single sideband signal right here. We've got some kind of spur over here, not within the radio, but with the RF I have. This is way more useful in the 3D waterfall space. So consider that. That's one of the first things I started mucking around with when I had more time to play. So the attenuator, being that it's before the SDR chain, you technically can do something where you turn the attenuator on and then give it some preamp. Give it preamp 1. And that'll bump up the incoming signals, and you get pretty good sound. You get pretty good sound actually doing that.
Looking for Italy Whiskey 7, Delta Hotel Charlie, Italy Whiskey.
So I'm listening to somebody on 7.188 megahertz, but there's a really strong station right next to it. You can hear it. And there's another one. Let's engage the roofing filter at 3 kilohertz. See what happens.
Italy Whiskey 7, Delta Hotel Charlie, are you there? Number 7 is checked.
I would like to point out that that person actually slid down considerably, but it's still doing some work on the station that we're actually listening to. In my experimentation, though, generally you can leave the attenuator off and the preamp in IPO. Now, you would change those depending on what was going on around your radio. Obviously, you see the floor dropped out, so let's get those blades of grass back a little bit. See, I like the look of that. I don't know, it reminds me of an old, like, 8-bit or a vector graphics game or something like that when I was a kid. Okay, so last is AGC. We were doing single sideband, so I generally have the AGC to slow, but I found that auto was fine. So just hit it, leave it in auto. Let's assume, for some reason, that there was a bit more noise around the station. It's a really loud station, really easy to copy, but you wanted to use some digital noise reduction on it. To turn it on, you just click it, and the light becomes illuminated. But if you hold it down, it's kind of a secondary control where you can adjust the DNR level. Stock, this comes out at 1, and I found that setting it at 5 or 6 does pretty good. So let me get out of that. Let me give you a listen to this.
Thanks for the 5 and 9. Would you like to call somebody on the call somebody else on the net? I can put you up for grabs. Would you like to try that?
So obviously the DNR is different than what's in the Yaesu FT891, but I've always really liked the DNR on that radio. And this sounds similar, a little fuller. Sounds like somebody's talking to you kind of in a room.
I flew that. It was a good domestic airplane, and I flew it down the Bahamas and Mexico once in a while. I flew this Stretch DC-8.
So aside from these major controls on the screen, most everything else is handled via the SDR. So the digital noise reducer, the noise blanker, contouring and notch filtering, the control of bandwidth, all of that stuff is being handled by the onboard programming in the FPGA. So it's kind of funny. The digital controls are for the analog components or the traditional components, and the digital controls are for the manual manual buttons. I think that's cool, and it follows the look that the Yaesus have. So that's obviously why they did it. Now, I don't have QRM directly on this station here, but let's play with the contouring, because I found this actually pretty helpful. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the span here, get some more space on the actual person talking. There we go. And let's enable the contouring. So this notch, this little dip here, is what you'd put on the QRM. The contour is adjustable, and it'll kind of suppress if you have a loud QRM signal. Let's slide across the contour while this person's transmitting.
Here, what's your
All right,
call
it's kind of in the
sign?
mud.
I got Tango Tango Delta. What's the first part? Yeah, K6 Tango Tango Delta. I got you now, Peter. Good to hear you there from Sacramento. And you're 5 and 8 down here in San Antonio.
That actually sounds pretty good. So that's a cool little feature, this contouring capability. And it has a matching notch filter that you can slide the knife edge up and get a sharper null if you're dealing with a large spike as some kind of local interference or something like that. Both of them are controlled by push button. One thing that's the same design as the 991A function button, and then you get a ton of options which give you controls for your CW, your different mic gain, audio levels, changing the color of the screen. Lots of different stuff in here that you can play around with. And then again, you have the deeper menus below. So if you wanted to set this up for doing digital, for instance, you would go into the radio settings mode and slide through the different controls. So single sideband, AM, FM, PSK, and data. So if, for instance, you wanted to set this up for doing digital mode, out of the box, standard settings, the only thing you probably have to mess with is go under operating settings, general, and set your cat rate to whatever you have the USB selected to. And the USB, let's see, the cat rate can go all the way up to 38,400 BPS, and it will go all the way down to 4,800 BPS. Band control is pretty straightforward. Click the band button. This goes down to 160 and all the way up to 6 meters. Let me do that again. Let's find a CW signal and play around with that a little bit. As I mentioned in the live stream, your 0 beat indicator is right there below the meter. And you need to pay attention to that if you want to use the decoder, because you do have to be in that underneath that red arrow. So you're in CW mode. You're a little off frequency. Get it kind of close, and then hit the Zin button when they're transmitting. There's your 0 beat. That'll allow you to then go into decode if you want to do that. The way to enter that is have your function button set to the words per minute of the radio for the internal keyer. Hit the function button again, click decode. That'll bring up a decode window. The decode off simply just takes you off the screen, so it's not like turning the decode on and off. I mean, it is, but it's actually turning off the screen. Decode level is kind of increasing the volume or increasing the gain or whatever you want to call it that goes into the decoder. And that allows you to, if you're having trouble decoding a signal or decoding any characters, adjust that until you start seeing stuff pop up. What you also will need to do is match the words per minute you hear of the CW that's coming in through the receiver to the words per minute on the keyer, and that will facilitate the decoding. Now, just a visual thing to note, if you want to increase the waterfall size that takes up the screen, click the waterfall, and it'll run through a cycle of 3 settings. And if you expand and then click, you get even more waterfall. So if you like seeing a lot of waterfall, this is how you do it. Setting it to middle is fine. Add the expand. That's about where I leave it most of the time.
Send him all the detail, and I did, and he modeled me. He said, "Oh yeah, that thing will work." So I did. Put it back up, and then it worked like a charm every set. So.
All right, so a handy little feature here is this CS button, which stands for Custom Select. It's a toggle on, which turns it on and off. But if you hold it down, it gives you a list of things you can select from. Normal is level, but if you hold it down, again, bring that up, you can change it to dimmer. And when it's on, it changes the outer ring to dimmer control without having to bring up the function button. This has some interesting uses because with this off, It gives you a fast scan through the bands. If you hold this down, right, you get all these different kind of controls. So let's do level next. We'll turn it on. So there's the waterfall level, and really blow it out, and you can dial it back. So if you want to get those blades of grass, just dial it back until you get that look that you're looking for. Again, changing the level doesn't affect the signals you're receiving. It just changes the display. And you can blow it out again, and then that's a completely unusable screen. Yeah, so just dial it down until you get that look you're looking for, to where it starts making sense. Now there's one issue. The only issue I encountered, really. It could be a problem for some of you. So we're looking at a 200 kilohertz spread of the waterfall. We widened it. A lot of radios, the VFO spins freer than this does. I know I sound like I'm complaining, but hear me out. There's very little play to this. And maybe you want that. I don't know. But this is a friction-controlled radio, meaning it has a drive reducer, not a drive reducer, but a friction control to slow down the momentum. And if it's fully open all the way to the left, it really doesn't have that much spin to it. With that said, it feels good. It feels solid. The outer ring is really nice. You know, if you have this off, you can fastly scrub through the band you're operating on. I found that I couldn't really spin this fast enough with my finger in the little divot there. So I would literally just take my hand and run it this way, which was more effective, but yeah, kind of not what you're looking for. And I will freely admit that is 100% a personal nit. That's just a personal thing. Your call on that. And if it does bother you, there is a fast way around that. If you simply select the part of the frequency you want to adjust, you can go through the band quite quickly, right? And then it'll change the level precision, or you can just type it in and you can get back to work that way. So there's lots of different options around it. Or of course, because it's a touchscreen, you can simply jump around by clicking. Now this does have a tuner. I believe it to be a 3-to-1 tuner. So there you go. This antenna doesn't require a tuner though, so I will leave it off. It is resonant. Yeah, I actually don't know why that took so long. Let me go to... That's interesting. This antenna is 100% resonant on this frequency. That is its spot where it's the lowest SWR. Anyway, let's turn that off. Now, I didn't plan this video to be like a walkthrough on how to use the radio. It's kind of more of my thoughts and what I found was super cool. But I will just say, band, select your band. Mode, you get all the mode options you want. And again, this will go from 160 up to 60. Great. Somebody must have turned their hairdryer off or something because the noise just dropped. So I don't know what happened, but I'll take it.
Set up here to watch the motorcycles go by, and they didn't ever even block off the road or anything there, the motorcyclers.
Okay, so to kind of wrap things up a little bit, I'm going to draw it back in, and I'm going to give you my personal thoughts on this. And again, I want to be really clear. When I try and do these reviews, I try and put myself into a user who this radio is for. Or I try to think about who might get the most use out of the feature set of this radio. This is a good radio. It's fun to use. It has a really interesting user interface that I personally like, that it's multiple options of getting around. It has the touchscreen, it has the center function button, but then it also has that CS button with the outer ring control. So at any one time, you can have two functions able to be adjusted in addition to the buttons that already exist on the front panel. People will find their own interesting ways of controlling this radio. And it's for that purpose, it's really good. So in the case of kind of explaining where your money's going on this, it's a $1,700 radio at launch, right? So inevitably coupons will come and stuff like that over time. But the thing to consider is that this is it's a step up from like an entry-level HF radio. The I/O ports in the back, the connections you can do, the discrete filtering that it has on the front end of the SDR chain, all that stuff kind of lends itself to more expensive radios. So yes, I would say it's justifiable for the price that it's at. It seems to fit kind of a sweet spot within the Yaesu lineup. It is obviously a step up from the 991, and it draws some of its capabilities from the MP101. The FTdx-10. You know, time will tell. Again, we're going to wait for the Sherwood report to come out on it. I hypothesize that it's gonna rank in the top 20, but it's gonna be on the lower side of the top 20. But mind you, I will say this on the Sherwood report: any radio that's in the top 20 is a really good radio, and I would even say top 30 are a really good radio with with the capabilities on the receive side of the house. Now, as far as video making goes, I can't seem to get this screen dialed in. It flickers a lot, and I will remind everybody, that is not the screen that you're going to see. Your eye's refresh rate is not as fast as the cycle rate shutter speed for the camera. The screen looks great, no question. Beautiful screen, good job. But just keep in mind, if you are a content creator, this is a little in the weeds, a little sausage making. We're going to have to figure out how to deal with that, because that's a little annoying. I'm going to see if I can adjust it in post, and if I do, I'll show you what it looks like before and after adjustment. Yeah, I know you guys, you want me to give you the would I buy it line. This has become tougher and tougher, and a lot of people watch my videos and other people on YouTube and the many reviews that are online. Everybody, keep doing that. Great work. You're really helping the hobby grow and continue staying strong. This is a radio, and I would say all HF radios, particularly on the beginner side of the house. If you're a first-time ham radio operator that's getting into HF, that kind of thing, this is really a radio you want to get in front of and try out. It has a specific user interface. It's a well-thought-out user interface, particularly on the front end, with the controls, the physical controls, and the way they did the screen. It is a good radio. I would recommend it. I would buy it. I just have so many competitive products in this price range, which is good for all of ham radio, right? So this is just another good example of a radio that is available on the market now. So if you look online, you see reviews of this in addition to mine, because nobody watches one radio review, right? You watch all the radio reviews. And if you like what this is doing for you, then yeah, you should buy it. So at the end of the day, good job, Yaesu. This is a nice radio. It's fun to use. I'm curious in the long run if we will see the hybrid style of SDRs continue forward, or in the SDR kind of world, the ideal configuration. SDRs generally, the belief is you want to get that analog into digital as fast as possible and pump it into the processing brain, whatever it may be. This has got things in front of it, and I don't know enough about those things to give you an opinion on whether that is a detriment or a positive. Obviously, discrete roofing filters, people love those. These seem to work pretty well, as I demonstrated earlier in this video. So yeah, the jury's still out on the long run, but where we are today, it's totally acceptable, and it works great. So I hope you enjoyed this video walking through the Yaesu FTdx-10. My favorite features on the radio, what I gravitated towards, what I found interesting. You do really want to check out this manual that is included. It is a good manual, a lot of detail in here. And surprisingly, there are little acronyms and stuff that, I use Yaesu's mobiles and HTs, and I obviously have the FT891 in my car, and I know how to use all those. It's fairly straightforward to operate them, but when you start getting into HF radios, and I would argue for most of the brands this way, if not all, there is a certain level of detail that you're going to pull out of manuals that you're not going to pull out just from looking and fiddling around a little bit. A lot of acronyms on the front of some of these radios, particularly for some of those advanced features. Manual did a good job of explaining that. Also, you get that little fantastic map, which you can put up on your wall and track all the contacts you make as you work your new radio. Anyway, I'm Josh, KI6NAZ. If you enjoyed this, consider giving me a thumbs up and subscribing. I live stream every Saturday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Click that bell to get notifications, and I'll talk to you later. See ya. like video production. Yeah, I'll get this over. Oh yeah, KM4ACK's wife made this for me. Go sub to his channel. Fantastic.